Trailokya Gita, Chapter 12 Kṛṣṇatattva Jñāna Yogaḥ. Association with knowledge of philosophy of Krishna.
Dāreshana balehīna parechinye bhavanti me kutolpetyatra sumahan tarko labhavadakshayah. Among the worldly bonds, the three strongest bonds called eshanas are with wealth, life partner, and issues. Gopikas, who were the sages, had crossed almost all the strong bonds except the weakest bond called Dāreshana, bond with the life partner, which is the only bond having facility of divorce. Now, the question is, if all the strong bonds were crossed, why the weakest bond was kept in the final birth to be crossed? Even though it is the weakest bond, without crossing this, it will not be considered as complete surrender to God, which means drop out of all worldly bonds, including this weakest bond, due to the bond with God. If this weakest bond alone is crossed, before crossing other strong bonds, fruit can't be attained. It is always rational to cross strong test first and then pass the weak test at the end. However, unless all the tests are passed, the fruit is not achieved. If this weakest bond alone is crossed in the beginning, neither fruit is obtained, nor the hell ordained for crossing this weakest bond can be avoided, which means no use and extra loss. Crossing this weakest bond means sin of the illegal sex, since all other worldly bonds were not crossed. If this weakest bond is crossed after all other bonds, total salvation is possible, by which crossing this weakest bond will not be a sin. Based on this complicated legal point, test of this weakest bond is arranged in the final female birth only. By putting this weakest test in the final birth, both good angles, which are benefit, total salvation, and no loss, not going to hell by breaking bond with life partner, are achieved. For crossing other strong bonds in the beginning, sin is not achieved. But for crossing this weakest bond in the beginning, sin is achieved. At the end, crossing this weakest bond is justified throwing away the sin, because without crossing this one weakest bond, total salvation from all worldly bonds becomes impossible. Hence, by putting this weakest test in the end, profit of total salvation is attained, and no sin for crossing this weakest bond is also simultaneously attained. In this way, lot of logic exists in arranging this weakest test in the final birth.